The catalase test is a pretty simple test to determine if a microbe contains an enzyme catalase that is used to break down hydrogen peroxide or does not contain the enzyme catalase. Hydrogen peroxide is H2O2, and what catalase does is it breaks down hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, into water and oxygen. So actually as the reaction proceeds, the production of oxygen will be visualized as this bubbling within our mixture. So a bubbling means that the bacterium contains catalase, so it's catalase positive. No bubbling, and it's got to be a vigorous bubbling, means that the bacterium does not contain catalase and thus is catalase negative. Relatively straightforward, many ways to do it. I like to use a slide method because it's cheaper and easier and allows us to do this many times. So take a slide, remember, nice and clean, and then just simply label your samples, circles, approximate area where you're going to drop your samples, right? We do not need to stay in the circles per se, and today label side up is okay. And I do like to work on the black table because it provides a nice contrast to our white bubbles. And so you take some hydrogen peroxide, oops, I kind of missed that one already, and then just like that, place it within those drops. And then all we're going to do is take some of our culture and we're going to stick that in our liquid, right? So nice and sterile loop. And then if our bacteria are behaving, our first one here should be catalase positive. So while I'm waiting for the loop to cool, we are going to use these as presumptive tests, right? So many times when you're doing a catalase test, it's more than just determining whether something is catalase positive or catalase negative. For this purpose, we are trying to determine whether our organism is a staphylococcus, i.e. it's a circle-shaped bacterium that grows in clumps versus a streptococcus, a circular bacterium that grows in chains. And sometimes under the microscope, it's hard to tell because you can have like chainy clumps or you can have clumpy chains, right? So sometimes the microscope stain is a little bit inconclusive and the way we treat these bacteria are very different, right? So the catalase test helps us because staphylococci, all these bacteria that are circular and grow in clumps, are catalase positive. Streptococci are catalase negative. All right, so here I have my mystery bacterium that may be a staphylococcus, may be a streptococcus. And if you're behaving, you should almost instantly be able to tell what type of bacterium this is. Oh, what do we see? Look at that. Bubbles, right? So the bubbling here means that this bacterium, catalase positive, which then means that this bacterium is a staphylococci. Right? Now remember, the idea of the presumptive test is that we are using a very quick and very simple test to do a very quick presumptive assessment as to the nature of this bacterium. That said, we cannot rely on this, right? Because there are many bacteria that are catalase positive that are neither staph nor strep. I guess that are not staph, right? And there are many catalase negative bacteria that are not strep, right? So the thing that's implied with this is that I would have taken this bacterium, I would have grown it on various media, I would have taken it under the microscope, and for me I would have said, this looks an awful lot like staph. I just want to make sure that it is indeed staph, do a very quick catalase test, and that then helps me with my assessment, right? So we very rarely rely on one single piece of data, and that's always going to be the case. Here now we have a bacterium B, and let's see what this feller does. Bacterium B now, once again, I took this under the microscope and I said, oh, it looks interesting. It's not quite the classic strep that I normally see in the textbook, but I believe it to be strep. So I'm just going to do a very quick little test. Notice, no bubbles. We don't see that vigorous bubbling. This then confirms that this bacterium is catalase negative, which then confirms my suspicion that this is some sort of streptococcus. Okay, so that's why that's a very quick and easy way to determine whether your coccus cells are a staphylococci versus a streptococci.